As we draw closer to July 4th and the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, it is time to examine some of the most holy men and women with ties to the United States. Saint Damien of Molokai was born in Belgium, but he spent 16 years of his time as a priest in Hawaii, ministering to people suffering from leprosy. He died in 1889, and a statue of him is on Capitol Hill. For more on the holy men and women in the history of the United States, we turn to Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President and Editorial Director of EWTN News. Matthew, thank you so much for being with us today.
I am so happy to be here to talk about this topic. I really am.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So we have several people to discuss, but let's start with Saint Damien of Molokai, who really cared for the discarded and the forgotten and the outcast. And that's a big part of building a culture of life. Can you tell us about him?
Absolutely right. Grew up in Belgium, really a very simple farming family, called to the priesthood, sent to Hawaii as a member of the Sacred Heart's congregation, arrives in 1864. He serves in various capacities, and then in 1873, a name slightly forgotten in history, Bishop Louis Désiré Maigret, who was the bishop of that region of what became the Diocese of Honolulu, asked for volunteers to go and help on the leper colony on Molokai. Now, when we say leper colony, the Kingdom of Hawaii, which it was a kingdom at the time, was really hard-pressed to deal with the leprosy crisis. And so one of the ways they wanted to care for the lepers was to sort of find them a way to be isolated so they could get proper care. Of course, resources were thin, and the situation rapidly deteriorated. So the diocese, the Catholics stepped in. And so this Bishop Maigret asked for volunteers, and Damien was the one who he stepped up. And so in 1873, he found himself on the island of Molokai and stayed there. He dedicated essentially the next 16 years of his life to the daily care. But the biggest thing that he did was to bring them the dignity of care. That he saw in each of these lepers the face of Christ, and he cared for them in ways that we can't even imagine what that was like.
Can you give us some examples of what that dignity of care looked like?
Yeah, well, when he arrived, obviously the conditions were not ideal at all. The medical care was scarce, so he began as best he could to provide medical care. But then he also dug graves, he built coffins. He bandaged their wounds. He was there when they died. He heard their final confessions. So he was there every step of the way of their journey as lepers. But one of the biggest things I think he gave them was the dignity of life and the dignity in death. And they were true outcasts at the time. No one wanted to be around them, but he was with them every step of the way. And that's why he gained such international fame. As the caretaker of the lepers, and we honor him today as the apostle for the exiles, apostle for those who are forgotten, who don't want to be seen by the world.
I think you're so right to highlight just like the dignity of death. I think it's the other cornerstone of the fight for life, and one that's often forgotten. Now, we know that St. Damien was not the only faith leader on Molokai. He was joined by a religious sister born in Germany, but with ties to upstate New York. Can you tell us about Mother Marianne Cope?
Mother Marianne Cope. So Damien, I think, was canonized in 2009. She was canonized in 2012, if I'm remembering right. I was there for both of the canonizations. Wow. German-born in Western Germany. Her family migrated to the U.S. She grew up in the area around Utica, joined the Sisters of St. Francis of Syracuse, and then rose very rapidly in leadership there, and received a letter one day from Hawaii, King Kalakaua, asking for the help. He had sent letters to 50 different communities of women religious asking for their help to care for the lepers in Hawaii. Wow. She was the only one who responded, and she set sail on what's the SS Mariposa and arrived in Hawaii. And where Damien laid the foundations for the care for lepers on Molokai, she then accelerated it and brought a heightened level of professionalism, but also really institutional care, and left this extraordinary legacy of care for the lepers there, but also for the whole of the island in providing medical care for those who needed it. So she is a testament to how saints, we always joke that they knew each other. Well, she knew Damien. She was there when he died and carried on his work, but left this tremendous legacy of faith that we honor today.
You know, I'm very struck just by the king asking for help and just people
Yes.
volunteering.
That's right.
Wholeheartedly.
Yeah, reaching out to a world in a moment of need. And it is so interesting, isn't it, that he sent these letters to Catholics
Yes.
for help. Why? Because he already had the role model of what the church was providing in the islands in Hawaii.
Wow, that's incredible. Now, another one of the holy men and women is Saint Elizabeth Ann Seton.
Yes.
Can you tell us about this first American-born saint?
First American-born saint, as you say, a convert. She belonged to a very prominent family in New York, the Setons, and grew up very prosperous, and her husband tried and failed to have a very successful business. He died, she became a widow, and ultimately converted to Catholicism. And the influence of the church and her friends who were Catholics, obviously that created huge problems for her with her family and sort of the social scene of the time. And found that haven with the Catholics. And through a series of deep discernments, she established this community, the Sisters of Charity, that went on in her name to establish orphanages and schools and hospitals, and left, we talked about Marianne Cope's legacy of care for the poor and the forgotten. That was one of the great legacies of Elizabeth Ann Seton, and also in education. So through her vision, through the courage that she had, first in becoming Catholic, but then in giving her life completely to Christ, she established this legacy of care that we can honor today, and we continue to do so.
Amen. Now, Matthew, soon we'll have another American-born
Yes.
holy figure recognized. Can you tell us about Archbishop Fulton Sheen?
Yeah, well, obviously one of the great communicators of the last 100 and some years, Emmy award-winning figure. He had the highest rated television show in America. He had the highest rated radio show in America. His books were read by millions of people. He brought tens of thousands of people into the church. But we also honor him when we're talking about the pro-life cause as being a true prophet for where we are today. I happen to be running, just turn the television on, and the EWTN's on all the time, as you can imagine. We still carry his old show, his old television show. What was he talking about in this one day? This is a show from the 1950s. He was predicting and warning everyone about what we would now call gender ideology, the idea that you can change a child's gender at will. He saw all of it. So for the pro-life cause, he was a true prophet in seeing so many of the problems that we have today. But it simply wasn't calling out the problems that we might have. He was actually laying out what is the antidote. The antidote is by recognizing the human person made in the image and likeness of God and being faithful to that, but then also encouraging parents and families and culture to recognize that dignity in the image and likeness of God, made as we were intended to be. And so Fulton J. Sheen, in so many ways, anticipated our problems, but he was especially so in the area of building a culture of life.
And I hope he'll continue to do so and intercede for us in that.
His beatification on September 24th, and we're going to be there.
Amen. Now, quickly, any final thoughts on Catholics and just the 250th anniversary of our country? Any hopes you have for our future?
Yeah, I think God has always called saints in every generation when they're needed the most. And I think 250 years from now, God willing, we will look back on American Catholic history and see another legacy of another 250 years, because I'm firmly convinced that saints are always going to be with us. Saints are going to appear right when we need them the most, as we saw with Damien, as we saw with Mother Marianne, with Elizabeth Ann Seton, Fulton J. Sheen. Names that will be known to subsequent generations that we will honor for their holiness and that we will honor as role models going forward.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bunson.
Privileged to be with you, really is.